to be me. In her book, Dying to be Me, author Anita Moorjani tells how, from the time when she was a little girl growing up in Hong Kong, she'd been pushed and pulled by different beliefs. Raised in a traditional Hindu family, she lived in a Chinese and British society. From her nanny, she learned Chinese customs and beliefs, including Buddhism. While attending British schools, she was told she must read the Bible and go to a Christian church every Sunday or she was going to hell. Still conflicted, she had been working in the corporate world for years when, at age 42, she was diagnosed with lymphoma. For 4 years, her body was ravaged by cancer and the psychological stress caused by the disease. During that time, as her weight dropped to 80 pounds, she became too weak to walk, and she began to give up hope that she would heal. After losing 2 friends to cancer and receiving her own diagnosis, Moorjani began to study everything she could about holistic health, including Eastern healing systems. She tried hypnotherapy, meditating, praying, chanting mantras, and taking Chinese herbal remedies. When none of these worked for her, she traveled to India to follow the healing system of Ayurveda. She told her yoga master that medical tests confirmed she had lymphoma. As she recounts in her book, he replied, quote, "Cancer is just a word that creates fear. Forget about the word and let's just focus on balancing your body. All illnesses are just symptoms of imbalance. No illness can remain when your entire system is in balance." End quote. He put her on a regime that included a specific diet of vegetarian food and herbal remedies, along with a routine of yoga poses that she did at sunrise and sunset. She spent 6 months in India, and during that time she regained her health. At the end of 6 months, she and her yoga master were convinced she was healed, so she returned to Hong Kong. Her friends told her how good she looked. When she told them about her Ayurvedic regimen, though, she received mainly fear-based and negative responses. While her friends were well-meaning and concerned, they'd been taught to believe cancer could not be cured with Ayurveda. Moorjani felt her old doubts and fears creep back into her psyche. At that point, she began experimenting with other ways of healing. She attempted traditional Chinese medicine, but because of its conflict with Ayurveda, she was confused. In traditional Chinese medicine, you're encouraged to eat meat, especially pork. In Ayurveda, you're encouraged to be a vegetarian. Meat is the worst thing you can eat. In desperation, she turned to Western naturopathy, but that just added to her confusion and fears. In that system, sugar and dairy are absolutely to be avoided, as they are thought to fuel the growth of cancer cells. In Ayurveda, dairy is a must, and sugar and sweet foods are required as part of a balanced diet. As she became overwhelmed with doubt, fear, and despair, she watched helplessly as her health deteriorated. Finally, her organ systems failed, and she slipped into a coma, death imminent. While her body was being cared for by doctors, she had a near-death experience that saved her life. On that journey, she learned that her only purpose in life is to be a full expression of herself, to love herself to the core of her being, and to share that fearlessly in the world. From a spiritual standpoint, she came to realize that heaven is a state, not a place, a state of at-oneness with God or being. We are ever in that state of being, but we don't realize it until we awaken. Moorjani emphasized that no belief in anything was required for her healing. Rather, it was a complete suspension of all previously held beliefs, doctrines, and dogma that caused her body to heal itself. Strongly held beliefs worked against her. Concrete beliefs limit possibilities by keeping us locked into the past, into what we think we know. Being comfortable with uncertainty opens us up to possibilities. When we step into the realms of ambiguity, we are at our most powerful. Moorjani's story illustrates the next topic we'll discuss, namely how profoundly experiences in the womb and early in life influence what we perceive, how we believe, and how we behave. All our ecological, economic, social, and political beliefs are culturally inflected in time and space. They are set in stone only insofar as we concretize them. Indeed, if we change the time when we were born, for instance 10,000 or even 1,000 years ago, our views will change radically. Likewise, if we change the place where we were born and raised, for example, the United States, India, China, Russia, or Saudi Arabia, we fundamentally alter what we perceive, what we believe, and how we behave. When we transcend all of our culturally inflected beliefs, I am this, I am that, I know this, I know that, I do this, I do that, and so forth, we arrive at who we are. Chapter 3, Savoring the Artist's Palate. During the 7 years I worked on a ranch in Colorado as a young man, we marked time with events. Chilly winds that blew down the valley from high mountain passes in spring signaled time to sow oats and barley and plant our vegetable gardens. Warm rays of summer sun melted the snow in the high mountains and gave us water to irrigate hay, which we baled, hauled from the fields to the barn, and stacked by hand. Cold winds that ushered in the first storms of autumn meant it was time to put up the last of the meadow hay, haul straw bales of oats and barley, the grain now threshed and stored in the granary. Winter was time to feed cattle, sheep, and goats the hay we'd stacked during summer and autumn. It was also a time to savor vegetables we'd stowed and sausages we'd cured. Late fall preparations for winter involved butchering hogs and making sausage. We began by building a small fire under a water-filled cauldron where each hog was scalded just after it was killed. 2 people, one on each side of the cauldron, held 2 chains, 1 chain in each hand, to support the hog's carcass. The hog was scalded on one side until its hair was easily removed, and then turned with the chains onto the other side, and finally flipped out of the cauldron onto wooden planks where the hair was scraped off with a knife. After that, the hog was gutted and put in the walk-in cooler. The next day, we prepared sausage. We filled the casings, the intestines we'd cleaned immaculately after the hog was butchered, with a special blend of meats and spices to make soppressata. We also prepared capricole, traditional Italian pork made from the muscle running along the neck to the 4th or 5th rib of the pork shoulder or neck. And we made hams. We hung the soppressata, capricola, and hams in the smokehouse, a cavity hollowed into hillsides decades ago. The sight of the meat hanging from smoke-coated iron rods that crossed the ceilings, along with the smells of the smokehouse, seasoned for decades by wood smoke from the apple trees that grew in our orchards, caused us to salivate like Pavlov's dogs. When I look back at those seasonal events now, I recall 2 overpowering sentiments that remain with me to this day. First, I felt then, and still do now, deeply linked with the landscapes where I was born and raised, including those that surrounded the ranch, mountains like Chavano, where we ran cattle in summer. The ranch